My son looked me straight in the eye across the dinner table and said, "Shut up, Dad. No one cares." And I didn't say anything. Instead, I smiled, put my car keys in my palm, and walked out of the room I'd spent my entire life paying for. He still thought I'd calm down and come back tomorrow morning, but this time things were different. I opened a folder containing deeds, titles, and transfers signed long before he learned to sign his own name. They'll learn that silence can be a father's loudest answer. Before we go any further, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. I arrived on time. The porch light at my son's house was already glowing a soft yellow. The doormat still read, "Welcome," its corners worn pale. I took a slow breath before pressing the bell. The familiar chime rang, and from inside came the clink of dishes and the faint smell of roast chicken. Evan opened the door, a dish towel still in his hand. "Come on in, Dad." He spoke quickly, like his mind was elsewhere. I set a small gift bag on the console, 2 comic books for the kids and a jar of honey I'd bought from a farm near town. Lena stepped out from the kitchen with a polite smile. "Have a seat. We're just finishing up." We gathered around the long table. The kids jockeyed to tell their school stories. I listened to every laugh, every familiar sound I'd spent years trying to hold together for this family. I didn't say much. Only when the chatter thinned and touched the table like the briefest lull did I offer a light memory. When Evan's mother was alive, every late fall she'd simmer fish bones with ginger. On cold nights like this, the whole house would smell amazing. Evan glanced up, then dropped his eyes at once. Lena looked at him, then at me, and then it landed, hard as a knife hitting stone. "Shut up, Dad. Nobody cares." The fork in my hand stopped midair. I thought I'd misheard. I hadn't. The words sat there, in the warm breath of the kitchen among the white plates. I heard the older child set a glass down, the faintest click. The younger one bent over the plate, nudging a chunk of potato with a spoon, not daring to look my way. Evan said nothing more. Lena forced a thin smile and reached for the salt. "Eat while it's hot." My heartbeat slowed, as if it were listening to itself. I set the fork down as softly as I could, so it wouldn't make a sound. At my age, you learn how to keep everything quiet so you don't trouble anyone. I looked at the wood tabletop and noticed the small scratch from when 15-year-old Evan dragged a hot pot across it by mistake. I'd said I'd sand it smooth someday, but I kept it, a mark of growing up. "You talk too much," Evan added, flat as if reading from a script. "Let us eat in peace." I gave the smallest nod, accepting a new rule I did not agree to. I didn't argue. I learned the old lesson. Sometimes words only give someone an excuse to smirk. I glanced at my hands, the thick calluses from years, the ink stains from contracts I signed so my son could have this house, this table, this dinner. I heard the younger ones swallow. They looked up for 1 second, met my eyes, then looked down again. In those eyes was something like an apology that didn't yet have words. I took a napkin, wiped the rim of my plate clean, and set it aside. I smiled, not at anyone, but at myself, as if drawing a clear line between what I can endure and what I shouldn't anymore. Quietly, just for me, I said, "Respect is the rent. You stopped paying a long time ago." The air cooled by a degree. Lena coughed and poured more water. Evan looked at me, about to say something, then thought better of it. I didn't wait. I reached for the key hook beside the phone. The light clink of keys was a neat and final, like a gavel tapping the end of a session. "I'm heading out," I said evenly. I didn't use the word "dad" in that sentence. Some words are sacred. You use them only when the listener still knows what they mean. No one stopped me. The kids stared at their plates. Lena pushed back her chair, pretending to bend for a fallen napkin. Evan looked off into some sudden task at the far end of the room. I walked to the door, set the gift bag on the bench by the shoes. "Presents for the kids," I said softly. "They can stay here." Outside, the night wind skimmed the frayed doormat. The yellow light washed over the asphalt. I paused and looked back through the little window in the door. The table kept moving as if nothing had happened. That told me more than the words themselves. A lot had changed long ago. I just refused to name it. I stepped out. The night air brushed my collar. Damp grass and the lingering roast followed me. I locked the gate slowly. When the lock clicked, a small, clean sound, I knew I'd made my choice. Not the choice to leave dinner. The choice to walk away from the old role of the man who swallows humiliation so the family can stay peaceful. I drove out of the neighborhood unhurried. Headlights swept the pavement, the front lawns, the warm windows of houses that weren't mine. In the rear view mirror, Evan's porch light shrank and vanished around a bend. I didn't turn on the radio. I needed to hear the engine, the tires, and the sound of my own mind changing. At home, I didn't switch on the lights right away. I stood in the hall, listened to the fridge hum, the wind at the door jam, the quiet of a place I'd treated as a stopover for too long. I hung the key ring on the wooden peg by the door, exactly where I'd often ignored it in a rush. The keys sat still, catching the warm lamp glow. I thought maybe it was time to replace the porch bulb. The light outside my door had been too tired for too long. I brewed a pot of tea. The steam fogged my reading glasses. I sat at the table and pulled out the folder I'd left untouched for months. A thick manila cover, corners a little curled. Inside were papers reminding me of simple facts. Whose name is on the car Evan drives? Whose signature sits under the roof where those kids sleep? Which account sends money where each month? I laid a hand on the numbers. They were cold as metal. But inside my chest, something warmed. Not because of money, because order was returning to its place. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text anyone. I didn't write a word to explain or to blame. I just opened my notebook and wrote a short line. Porch light, replace. Old mat, toss. Lawyer, schedule. I underlined lawyer once, not from doubt, but to make it stand out like something whose time had come. Before bed, I stepped onto the porch and looked up. Not many stars, but enough to know tomorrow night would be different. I looked down at the welcome mat. I lifted it, shook off the dust, and leaned it against the wall. Leave it for now. Some things deserve a small ceremony when you let them go, so you know you're releasing them with your mind, not your anger. In the bedroom, I set my wife's photo on the nightstand. Today I kept quiet, I whispered, but not from fear. Quiet so I can start speaking a different way. I turned off the light. Darkness settled, soft as a thick blanket. For the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of a long table and stories cut short. Tomorrow I'll make the calls. Tomorrow I'll change the porch bulb. Tomorrow I'll set the old mat aside. Tomorrow I'll start rewriting the boundaries of my life with small tasks, then larger ones. But tonight I need only one thing: peace in my own home. The next morning the house felt as if someone had left very early. I woke before the sun touched the edge of the curtain. The kettle hissed to a boil, steam fogging my glasses. I poured tea, sat at the table, and opened the thick yellow file folder I'd left there for a long time. Paper rustled softly. The lines ran steady. Accounts, automatic transfers, debit dates, recipients. Numbers that knew no shame. I picked up a pen and wrote 3 lines on the blank sheet beside me. Replace porch light, schedule lawyer, stop mortgage transfer. When I finished, I sat still for a long while, listening to the clock tick. I thought of last night's words, a cold blade laid on the dinner table. But right now, in the quiet of my kitchen, I couldn't hear the blade anymore. Only the kettle settling and the clear feeling of a man who'd laid his hand on the doorknob of his own life. I called the bank. A few rings. A warm, even receptionist's voice. I gave my name, read off my account, asked for the branch manager. A few minutes later, a calm baritone came on. Good morning. This is Mark, branch manager. How can I help? I need to immediately stop the automatic transfer to my son's bank, I said slowly. The mortgage payment on the 15th of each month? He asked a few verification questions. I answered them all, including the long string at the end of the transfer agreement. His voice kept time with his keystrokes. I see the recurring transaction has been running 4.5 years. Do you want to stop from next cycle or stop today if there's still processing time? Stop today. A brief pause. Noted. The system shows it's been successfully canceled. You'll receive a confirmation letter by mail. Would you like me to print a receipt for pickup? I'll come by today. I hung up and rinsed the teacup. Hot water tapped porcelain with a small sound. I dried my hands and looked at the wooden peg by the living room door. Last night, I'd hung my keys there like a statement to myself. This morning, I looked at them as a reminder I didn't need to speak aloud. From now on, not a dollar leaves my account just because habit says so. I put on a jacket, took the folder, and drove to the branch. The lobby was cool and smelled of fresh paper. The manager recognized me, stood and shook my hand. He handed me the printed receipt, crisp black type. Would you like to leave a note for customer care in case the recipient calls? He asked. I'd like to leave one sentence, I said. All inquiries to go through my attorney. Here's the card. He clipped the card to the file, nodded. I'll enter the note into the system. I thanked him and left. By the door sat a small plastic tray of department business cards. I took one from loan servicing and slipped it into the folder. I knew it would be useful later, not to present, but to remind myself I'd followed the process. At noon, I sat in a small conference room at my lawyer's office. White light fell onto a polished wooden table. My lawyer has worked with me for years, a dry man whose every word is straight and spare. What do we need to update? He asked. I need 3 things, I said. First, update beneficiaries. Remove my son from all of them. Second, issue a letter requiring all financial contact to go through your office. No direct calls, no private messages. Third, prepare a notice to my son's bank that my support has ended. He nodded, jotting quickly. Do you want to leave them a door for a public apology in exchange for a non-disparagement understanding? He asked. I don't need an apology in exchange for anything, I said. I just need the truth to stand in its proper place. If they smear me, proceed under the law. We reviewed each item in the file. He handed me a packet. I read, corrected one word, and signed. The pen moved slow but sure. Each signature felt like setting a brick back into the foundation, firm as mortar pressed into old joints. We'll send certified letters this afternoon, he said. They'll receive them tomorrow. The day after, we'll have the stamped confirmation. Good, I said. The clearer it is, the fewer problems. Leaving the office, I didn't go straight home. I stopped at the hardware store in the corner and bought a new porch bulb. The clerk asked warm or cool light. I thought a moment and chose warm. On the drive back, I cracked the window so the smell of paper and new plastic could drift through the car. The scent of something being replaced. By afternoon, my kitchen greeted me with thin tea and a light breeze. I set the bulb on the table and opened the folder for one last check. The cancellation receipt lay on top. Beneath it, the loan officer's card, then the 3 documents I just signed. I clipped everything together and circled the word terminated in red. My phone buzzed, Evan's name on the screen. I didn't pick up. A minute later, a text. Dad, can you pick up the kids at the schoolyard tomorrow evening? We've got meetings. I set the phone down. I wasn't angry. I just didn't want to fall back into the small tasks I'd done for years, as if they were obligations, while others treated them as entitlements. I went to the porch and unscrewed the old bulb. It was heavy and grimy. I wiped the socket clean and fitted the new one. When the switch clicked, warm light poured over the steps, clear and clean. I looked at the welcome mat leaning against the wall. I'd stood right here last night, lifted it, then decided to leave it for now. Today, I still didn't toss it. I wanted it to witness one more day while the boundary lines were redrawn. Back inside, I set the kettle on again. When the indicator shifted from red to green, I remembered what I'd said last night. Respect is the rent. You stopped paying long ago. I wouldn't say it to anyone else now. I just remind myself, so when my heart goes soft, I'll know where to stand. That evening, my lawyer texted, certified letters filed, tracking attached. I'll send scans in the morning. I replied with 2 words of thanks. On the table, the folder lay neat. I set on top of it an old photo of my wife and me in front of the house the day we finished the roof. The sunlight was harsh and white in the picture, and we were smiling, not knowing the future held long dinners and short, knife-edged remarks. I made a round of the house, turning off switches. At the door, I paused before the key peg. I touched the ring lightly, the way you pat the shoulder of an old friend. Night fell. In that quiet, I heard one thing clearly. Today was the first day in many years I did something for myself without asking anyone's permission. As I was about to head to the bedroom, the phone buzzed again. A neighborhood group alert. New post in community news. I looked at the screen for a few seconds and turned it off. I didn't open it. The big things in a life sometimes begin with postponing a small curiosity. I closed the bedroom door, leaving the warm porch light washing the steps outside. Enough light for anyone approaching to see the boundary, and enough for me to know that, as of today, the entryway to my life has a new lock. That morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First came Evan's text. "Dad, you're overreacting. Last night was just a slip. Let's talk at lunch." I hadn't finished reading when Lena's messages poured in. "Don't cut the transfer. There are kids in this house. Are you going to make them suffer?" A minute later, a family group notification. "Everyone weigh in. Dad's upset. Can anyone talk him down?" Under it were short comments from relatives. "Old folks are touchy. Just be gentle and it'll blow over." I set the phone face down. The kettle ticked as it boiled. I poured tea and leaned on the window frame, looking out at the porch. The new bulb I'd installed last night cast a warm gold, washing over the clean steps. That light reminded me, some things you flip once and let them do their job. I'd done mine. The window gave a small rattle. Out on the street, the garbage truck passed. A worker waved. I waved back, then sat at the table, opened my file folder, and arranged the papers in order. The stop transfer receipt, the loan officer's card, the certified letters sent, the list of assets in my name. I slipped in a sheet with dates and times so every page had a clear timestamp. The phone buzzed again. Evan called. I didn't pick up. A text followed at once. "The bank says the transfer's stopped. What are you doing? Did you forget the agreement?" I replied with one short line. "Direct all questions to my attorney. Number below." Then I pasted in the lawyer's card and hit send. No explanations. At noon, I went to the bank to collect the printed confirmation. The lobby was cool and smelled of fresh paper. Manager Mark came out, shook my hand. "One small thing," he said quietly. "The system has stopped it, but we need a hard copy stop payment authorization. Otherwise, if this cycle's transfer has already queued, we might have to wait for a refund." "I'll sign right now," I said. "And one more detail," he glanced at the clock. "Cutoff is 11:30. You arrived 11:47. I flagged it priority, but the central desk will need your signature and a second photo ID." I reached for my wallet and realized I'd left my readers at home. The form's print was dense and small. Mark lent me the counter's spare glasses, a loose frame but readable. I handed over my driver's license. He nodded, then frowned slightly. "License is fine, but the photo corner's peeling. Central can be strict. Do you have your passport?" "At home," I said. "I'll go get it and come back." The drive back was short, but felt longer because I refused to rush. I opened the metal box, took the passport, and grabbed a printout of the morning's message screenshots. When I returned, Mark had the forms laid out. I signed, presented the passport. "All set," he said. "I'll call it in directly. We may still beat the cutoff." I thanked him. At the door, the receptionist called after me. "Sir, the stamp on the passport copy came out light. Give us 5 minutes. We'll restamp it." The stamp machine hiccuped. Staff replaced the ink and tried again. The second thump was clear and firm. I took the packet now marked priority, a few small snags in the path, but step by step the road opened. I stopped by the print shop on the corner. The printer jammed as soon as it took the file. The clerk flustered. "One moment, sir." I took off my jacket and sat, watching the strip of neon blink like a reminder that everything keeps its own tempo. The machine resumed. I reviewed and spotted one screenshot whose timestamp was hidden by the notification bar. I asked for a reprint. He nodded, adjusted margins, enlarged it. This time the time showed clearly. Little details like that, if missed, become openings for someone to quibble later. I asked him to combine 3 sets: family, bank loans, community, neighborhood. Clear covers, black spines, tidy and clean. Back home, I hadn't even taken off my shoes when the doorbell rang. Mr. Fuck from next door stood on the porch, holding the neighborhood bulletin. "Look at this complaint section," he said, pointing to. An elderly father walked out on dinner, leaving children worried. No names, but everyone on the block would guess. He looked apologetic. "Young folks are impulsive. Best not to let it spill outside the block." "Thank you," I said. "I won't argue on paper. If needed, I'll bring the truth on paper." I borrowed the bulletin, filed it under Community Neighborhood, and noted the date and time received. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A courteous woman from loan servicing. "Sir, a family member called asking why the transfer was stopped. They're quite anxious and hoped you'd reconsider. I've left a note in your system," I said. "Please route all contact through my attorney's office." "Yes, sir. They did request 1 more month so credit scoring isn't affected. We're required to pass that along." "I understand," I said, and the answer remains, "Work with my attorney." The call ended, neat as a door closing. A moment later, my lawyer texted, "Received 2 voicemails, one from Evan, one from someone claiming to be a family friend. Rather threatening tone. I've saved the audio." He added, "Bank confirms the stop made today's cutoff. Central requests an additional wedding stop order, printed and ready. Please sign before 5 p.m. I checked the time. Plenty left. Before heading out, I opened my email. The neighborhood forum admin had replied to the removal request Mr. Fuchs sent on my behalf. "We remove posts only for clear falsehoods or active legal disputes. We encourage the parties to resolve privately." I wasn't irritated. I screenshotted the reply and printed 2 copies. Leaving that noise hanging in the air is another method. The more unfairness floats, the louder the truth rings when it arrives. Late afternoon, I stopped by the lawyer's office to sign the stop order. The receptionist added a bank contact authorization form. I read carefully and saw the default scope set to exchange information. I had it changed to negotiate and receive notices on my behalf. A small tweak, different meaning. After signing, I stood and accidentally dropped my pen. As I bent to pick it up, I noticed under the table a cardboard box labeled Evidence Backups. I pointed. "I'd like to buy a memory card for my own file." She smiled. "That one's ours, but I can sell you a new one." I nodded. One more backup stored elsewhere in case another copy goes missing. On the way home, I stopped at the post office to open a P.O. box. The clerk asked for 2 forms of ID. I handed over my driver's license and health insurance card. He shook his head. 2 photo IDs. I rifled my wallet. No passport. As I turned to leave, I remembered the passport was still in my bag. I unzipped and pulled it out. He smiled. "That'll do." I filled the form and chose a small box. "Lots of folks opening boxes lately," he said idly. "People prefer sensitive mail to come here." I said nothing. The tiny key sat cool in my palm. Another boundary raised. A private gate for what enters and leaves my life. Back home, I changed and cooked a simple pot of soup. As it boiled, the scent of scallion rose. I turned off the stove, sat, and let 1 full minute of quiet pass. The wall clock ticked. Since my wife died, I've rarely let myself sit still this long. Today I treated it as necessary work, sitting still to mark the boundary. The phone rang. This time I answered. Evan spoke fast. "Dad, don't make this a big deal. My boss asked about a late payment. Do you know what 1 missed cycle does to a credit score?" "I do," I said. "And I also know what years of late respect do to a man's self-respect." "What's that supposed to mean?" It means from now on, money doesn't travel by phone. If you need anything, speak to the lawyer. He kept his voice tight. You want to make this public? You want people to call me unfilial? I want the truth in its proper place, said. As for labels, each of us wears our own. I hung up. A long scolding text from Lena came in at once. You're not thinking of the kids. You don't love your daughter. You want this family broken. I read it, saved it, didn't reply. I opened the cabinet and took out an old document box. Inside was the original title transfer for the car Evan drives. I filed it under family with a copy, not to threaten, so everything sits together when needed. I updated my voicemail greeting. If you're calling about financial or legal matters, please leave your name and contact. My attorney will return your call. For other matters, please leave a message. I played it back. My voice was calm, no tremor, no bitterness. Night fell. The porch lamp pooled warm light, just enough. I sat at the table and wrote 3 fresh lines in my notebook. Files complete. Voicemail updated. Boundaries held. I closed it, leaned back, and shut my eyes for a few even breaths. Peace didn't come because everything was done. It came because the first necessary things had been done right. The phone buzzed once more. A text from an old friend. They just posted in the community section about you leaving dinner. Headline's nasty. I didn't comment, just letting you know. Attached was a screenshot. I zoomed in and read every line. As always, they told half the story. I stood, opened the cupboard, and took out the canvas bag with my old camera. I set the camera on the table and wiped the fine dust from the lens. I wasn't shooting tonight. I just wanted it there. Ready. Beside it lay the 3 bound packets, stacked in order. Porch light edged the table with a band of gold. Before bed, I left one short note on the answering machine. One-sided stories will need light. I have light. No one would hear it but me. Saying it straightened my back. Close to midnight, the lawyer called back. Central confirms the stop is locked. No transfer this cycle. He paused, then added, however, the other side just emailed a request for family mediation. I'll reply with the standard. Set feelings aside and follow the paperwork. Good, I said. Proceed as planned. I set the phone down and stepped onto the porch again. The night air was cool. The warm light spread over the steps, clear and clean. At the rim of that circle, my shadow stretched, neatly like an underline at the end of a sentence. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The sky was still dim, a thin veil of dew on the fence. From the kitchen came the faint whistle of the kettle and the smell of coffee. I pulled a wooden chair near the window, opened my old notebook, and wrote 3 short lines in slow, clear script. No arguing, no explaining, only action. When I finished, I closed the notebook, took a deep breath, and began a day entirely different from those before. My phone buzzed. A message from the family group lit the screen. This Saturday night, we're having guests. Dad, come early to help us set the table. It was from Lena. Below it, Evan added, my in-laws, a few colleagues, some neighbors. Come around 5:30. I read it twice, set the phone down, and watched the first stripe of sunlight fall across the table. So this party was the very place where laughter had taken their side the other night. If they wanted a crowd, I would let the truth appear before a crowd. I opened the cabinet and took out the 3 comb-bound folders I'd prepared. Family, bank loans, community neighborhood. I added a new one titled Screenshots, Recorded Words. Homari, inside were images of the insulting texts, missed calls, and the snide forum comments Mr. Fuss had shown me. I didn't add angry annotations. I only numbered the pages and dated them. I stopped by my lawyer's office the moment they opened. He stood to greet me and set a fresh stack of papers on the table. Confirmation of the stop transfer, the bank contact authorization, beneficiary updates for the retirement fund. He said, I have one more suggestion. If you want to avoid being dragged through public opinion, prepare a short boundary statement. No commentary, just factual milestones and how you're moving all exchanges into legal channels. I nodded. He typed it up, printed it, and handed it to me. I made one change. I added the line, "All images and messages used originate from my personal devices or were posted publicly by them on the forum." I signed. He nodded, clipped it to a stiff backing. "Whatever you decide to do Saturday, do it on paper." Upon leaving his office, I stopped at the post office for certified mail. Return receipt labels. I wrote the names of each person who would attend the party on white envelopes, my hands steady not from hesitation but care. Each envelope held a set of copies, the transfer timeline, the stop confirmation, screenshots of the insults, and lastly, the boundary statement. I didn't send them yet. I brought everything home, stacked the envelopes on the table, and checked the order. On the upper right of each set, I penciled a small code to remember which packet went to whom. Near noon, the doorbell rang. It was Ms. Hahn from the head of the alley, holding a plate of cookies wrapped in parchment. She hesitated. "Please don't be upset. This morning's forum post has many unpleasant comments. I asked the admins to intervene, but..." I invited her into the kitchen and poured her tea. "I know," I said. "Thank you for speaking plainly. I won't debate this online. When it's time, I'll set the truth in front of them." She glanced at the stack of folders, nodded gently. "Take care of yourself. The kind aren't always silent." I walked her out. The sun had climbed higher, the birch trees throwing long shadows across the path. In the afternoon, I went to the bank for notarized copies. The notary clerk said, "Our printer just flagged a low ink error. 10 minutes, please." I wasn't impatient. I stood by the glass and watched the parking lot. A young couple came out with a baby, smiling at something small between them. I remembered when I was young too, one arm holding a child, the other lugging groceries, never imagining there would come a day I'd write a boundary statement for my own family. 10 minutes later, the clerk returned with a warm stack, seals red and even. I thanked her and filed them away. Back home, I wiped down the small dining table, spread a sheet of brown paper as a work surface, and lined up the envelopes to seal. The glue stick was nearly empty. I inverted it and ran it along each flap. On the last envelope, the glue ran out completely. I took a roll of tape from the drawer and added a neat strip along the edge. Seeing the row of straight envelopes calmed me. Everything was ready to speak for me. Near dusk, a horn sounded out front. Evan pulled up at the gate without killing the engine and called, "Dad, come out. 5 minutes." I stood on the porch, hands in my pockets, looking at him. The headlights washed me a pale white. "If you come inside, we can talk," I said. "If it's like last time, then no." He smirked, eyes flicking to a thin parcel on the entry table. "You starting to serve papers on everyone?" His tone was half sneer, half anxious. I stayed even. "If you want an adult conversation, my lawyer has a room at 10 a.m. tomorrow. If you want a blame session, skip it." He pressed his lips tight. The engine revved, the car backed up and shot off. The sound faded and was gone. I went back in, put the parcel in the cabinet and locked it. The next morning I ran to the print shop to make 2 extra sets. As I walked in, the printer seized with a paper jam. The clerk gave an embarrassed grin. "Bad luck again, sir." I checked my watch. "It's fine. Don't yank. Ease it out." He pulled a crumpled page free. I asked him to print the hardest page first, the screenshot with the tiny timestamp, to test. When it printed, I laid it beside the original, leaned close, saw the time clearly. I nodded. One more small thing settled. At noon, my lawyer called. They declined the meeting. They emailed a family reconciliation letter asking you to stop actions damaging their reputation. I replied with the standard document, attaching the list of materials and requesting evidence for any allegation. He paused, then gently added, "If you show up Saturday, stick to the plan. Present truth on paper, no arguing, don't get pulled into an outburst." I said, "I remember." That afternoon, 2 missed calls appeared from a landline at the local paper. The voicemail was a woman's voice. "We received a complaint about an elderly man. Could you confirm?" I didn't call back. Some stories aren't answered by phone. I printed the voicemail notice, noted the time, and filed it under community neighborhood. By evening, I packed a canvas bag with one copy of everything. Stop transfer proof, the boundary statement, screenshots, the lawyer's letter. I added a few paper clips, a pen, a small roll of tape. I stepped onto the porch and turned on the light. The familiar gold poured over the steps. I stood there a few minutes, listening to the wind in the trees. In it, I felt an unfamiliar steadiness. Not because I would win or lose, but because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying a single pleading word. Saturday morning, I rose early and pressed a dark blue shirt. I shaved close and polished my old shoes. Before leaving, I set a sheet of paper on the kitchen table. If you need to reach me, leave a letter in the P.O. box. I don't take verbal messages. I locked the door, slid the note into the box, and turned the key. One soft click. I stopped at the flower shop near the market and bought a small bouquet of white chrysanthemums tied with a blue ribbon. The clerk smiled. That bouquet suits a photo of someone departed. I nodded lightly and tucked the flowers into the canvas bag beside the folders. Not to court sympathy, only to remember that the woman who taught me self-respect is still watching me walk straight. In the afternoon, I swung by the old church and lit a candle. I didn't beg for anything. I just whispered, "Let me keep my steady voice." I sat in the last pew for 5 minutes, then stood and stepped back into daylight. Evan's house wasn't far. I drove slowly, stopping at a corner store for a roll of labels, in case I needed to write names on envelopes on the spot. At 5:30, I parked across the street from Evan's. Warm light and chatter spilled from the windows. On the steps, a pair of heels and a pair of men's dress shoes lay askew, the host busy with guests. I lifted my bag and crossed the street. Inside, the music was the kind people play to fill awkward pauses. I rang. The door opened. Lena stood there, eyes fixed for a beat before she recovered a smile. "You're right on time." Evan came scrambling from the kitchen, forcing cheer. "Dad, help me carry the trays out." I didn't step in yet. I pulled a small envelope from my pocket and handed it to them. "This is my boundary statement. Read it before dinner starts." I'll say this once. I didn't come to make a scene. I came to put the truth on the table. The way you're putting the dishes. Lena glanced at Evan. He started to say something, saw the weight of the canvas bag in my hand, and fell silent. I walked in and went straight to the dining table. Extra chairs had been set out. The tableware gleamed. The cloth lay smooth. A large vase sat in the center. I set the bag on the head chair. In the kitchen, pots and pans chimed. The first guest pushed the door open, smiling, hand outstretched. I replied softly, using the person's name. As each guest arrived, I greeted them, asked a short, polite question, kept my voice level. I didn't make small talk or paste on a grin. I simply observed and marked where each person sat. Each place would receive an envelope, a measured portion of truth. The wall clock showed 6:15. Everyone had arrived. Evan clapped. "Please, take your seats." I stood, one hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. The room settled, the music lowered. I looked around the table at faces that had only heard half a story. I exhaled slowly and spoke a single sentence, clear and precise. "Before dinner begins, I'd like each of you to receive an envelope. Inside is your portion of the truth." I opened the bag, pulled out the sealed, labeled envelopes, quickly added names with the new label roll, and handed one to each person. No long explanation, no reproach, only paper and words. When I set down the last envelope, I returned to my chair, drew it back, and sat upright. Evan started, "Dad, this is our house?" I raised a hand, not high, just enough. "Read, then say whatever you like." The room was silent. Paper opened, the soft rustle like light rain. I watched the second hand sweep the clock face. No one laughed, no one joked. Only the sound of paper. Lena turned to the screenshots of her own words and froze. The neighbor who had dropped hints online saw their post in print and lowered their eyes. Evan's colleague read the transfer timeline and pressed his lips together. The light over the table had changed. I sat still, as calm as I am beneath my porch lamp. I knew that once they finished reading, the room would produce a lot of noise. Not music, not laughter. Noise of truth scraping against pride. Reason knocking on ego. And I was ready for that moment. Evan suddenly shot to his feet, fist tight around the envelope, face flushed. He started to shout, but looking around and seeing everyone bent over the pages, the rustle strangled his throat. He turned to me, voice low and shaking. "Dad, what do you want from this?" I looked him in the eye and answered slowly, "To have your dinner begin with the truth." The doorbell rang. The room froze. I didn't turn my head. "Open it," I said. As the door cracked, every gaze lifted from the papers, and I knew this dinner would no longer be a private affair. The door had barely opened when everyone turned. The late arrival was a short-haired woman wearing a small badge from the local paper. She offered a polite smile and raised her camera. "Sorry I'm late. I'm Lily, here for the Christmas on the Block photo series. I'm hoping I can still catch a few cozy dinner shots." No one answered right away. Each person still held their envelope. On the table, my papers lay among the gleaming knives and forks. The reporter hesitated, glanced at the boundary statement in the neighbor's hand, then looked up. The air no longer matched the host's original plan. Evan cleared his throat, trying to set the pace. "Let's eat first, everyone." Dad handed out a few papers from a misunderstanding. "We'll talk after we eat." He turned to the reporter. "You can shoot the plating and we'll—" I set the bouquet of white chrysanthemums on the cabinet by the window and straightened the vase. "No rush," I said. "The best pictures tonight are pictures of the truth." I looked straight at the reporter. "You don't need to shoot if it feels wrong. But if you're here, read. We have all three things right here. The money that was paid, the words that were said, and the line that's been drawn." Lily looked at Evan, then at Lena. Both tried to smile. She took the packet I handed her, stepped back, and flipped through it. The rustle of paper swelled like a small wave. Someone set a glass down, slowly. The neighbor leaned forward and pointed at a screenshot. "That's my comment from the neighborhood forum." "Who printed it?" I answered. "You wrote it. The forum saved it." "I printed it so the people being gossiped about have the right to read it." Lena's parents sat on her side. Her mother pursed her lips at me. "Bringing papers to the dinner table is rude." I nodded. "I agree. But the shut up at the dinner table the other night was ruder than rude." I didn't come to argue. I came to clear this table of what's been hidden. Her father-in-law gave a derisive chuckle. "You're old. Family matters should be discussed quietly. No need for a circus." I rested my hand on the folder and kept my voice low. Quiet had its turn. Since that night, this stopped being private. Lena drew a breath, trying to keep the host's posture. "Please don't mind him. Dad misunderstood. We've always taken care of him." The reporter looked up and asked evenly, "Then these transfers, what are they?" She tapped the timeline with her finger, month by month, date by date. Evan leaned forward. "Dad volunteered. He likes helping. No one asked." I didn't argue. I slid the stop transfer letter with the red stamp to the middle of the table. "There will be no more starting next month. I've told the bank, and I've told my lawyer, any demand from now on must be in writing, with a signature and basis. No more dinner time calls asking to float the credit card or saying, 'This month is tight.'" Across from me, one of Evan's colleagues lowered his eyes to read a screenshot of Lena's snide line about clinging to old stuff. He looked up, voice even. "You told us your uncle insisted on paying because he loves you? I don't see anything like that in these messages." Evan flushed. "You don't get it." The colleague shrugged. "Maybe, but words know how to stand up all by themselves." The reporter set the dossier down. She no longer lifted her camera. "I won't be photographing dinner tonight," she said, gentle but clear. "And I won't be writing a cozy Christmas piece. If I write at all, it'll be how a family uses money and honor. But I won't write without signed confirmation from both sides." She turned to me. "Anything you want to say before I go?" I replied, no, I've done my part. The rest is for those involved to read and reflect. At that, Lena's voice cracked. If you've planned all this, how do you expect us to live? Do you want us humiliated in front of our friends? I looked at her. No anger, no raised voice. Humiliation doesn't come from paper. It comes from how you treat the person who raised you. I'm not taking anyone's face. I'm holding up a mirror. Her mother tapped a spoon against a plate. You're shaming my daughter. I shook my head. I'm ending the habit where my daughter treats shaming as normal. Evan couldn't take it any longer. He jumped up and jabbed a finger toward the bouquet on the cabinet. Even bringing flowers. You have to look virtuous. You love to perform. I looked at the flowers, then at him. Those are for my wife, your mother. If she were here, there wouldn't be these envelopes tonight. But she isn't, and I have to do the part she left me, to remind people right at the table that respect is also a main course. The reporter closed her notebook and headed for the door. As her hand touched the knob, the phone rang in the kitchen. With wet hands, Lena fumbled and hit speaker. Hello? A man's steady voice filled the room. I'm calling from the bank's office. This is to inform you that the automatic payment has been canceled at the account holder's request. If you wish to continue, please set up your own account within the next 10 days. Lena froze, glanced around the table, then hung up. The room was silent for a long moment, so quiet we could hear someone's spoon tremble against a glass. I slid my chair back and stood. I'm leaving each of you a copy. I'm not asking anyone to understand me. I'm not requiring anyone to speak about that night. I looked at the guests and spoke slowly. But if one day you read a half story somewhere, remember the other half is sitting on your table. Evan circled the head of the table and blocked my way. Where are you going? Home, I said. He lowered his voice, hissing through his teeth. You can't wreck my family and just walk out. I looked into my son's eyes and saw a flicker of fear beneath the anger. Families wreck themselves when they put humiliation on the table. I'm only clearing my part away. An older guest, the neighbor on the left, set his envelope down and said to Evan, You invited us for pictures, and it turns out we're here to witness this. No one enjoys it, but I'm glad we heard both sides. Don't call this wrecking. Call it release, to be accurate. He finished and gave me a small nod. I picked up my canvas bag. Lena blurted, If you leave, we're stuck. I paused a beat. I've been stuck for years. Today I unstick myself. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer where I used to keep their spare house key. It was still there, hanging on an old plastic tag. I placed it on the counter and turned it so the logo caught the light. I'm returning this to where it belongs. The rest I'm taking back with me. I headed for the door, unhurried, unflustered. Outside, dusk had fallen. The reporter stood on the porch with her hands in her coat pockets. She asked softly, Will you sleep well tonight? I smiled, tired but at ease, like someone who set the last brick exactly where it should go. I stepped down. A guest eased the door open and followed me out, awkward. Sir, thank you for letting us read. I nodded. Thank you for reading. I walked past the chrysanthemums, plucked a small sprig, and tucked it into my pocket. The door closed behind me, the lock clicked. I didn't look back. The road ahead was long and quiet. I didn't need to defeat anyone in that house. I only needed to defeat myself for the miles remaining. Inside, voices rose again, splintered and overlapping. Someone asked if that bank call was real. Someone said they should stop inviting reporters to dinner. Someone said, This is out now. I heard it all the way, a distant rain is heard. I opened my car door, sat in, set the bag on the passenger seat, and touched the flower in my pocket as if touching the hand of someone gone. I murmured a line meant only for me. It's done. I started the engine. Headlights swept across the brick wall, across a few figures moving behind curtains, then slid onto the street. I didn't drive fast, just enough to see every house number glide by. Each number was a steady breath. I matched my breathing to them. The rest would be tomorrow. And for tomorrow, I had enough papers to stand upright. At a red light, I stopped and glanced at the rearview mirror. The street behind had grown small. I didn't try to read what was unfolding in that house anymore. I placed my hands on the wheel, the smooth, cool grain beneath my palms. A black cat crossed the road, paused in the beam of light, looked up, and moved on. I flicked the signal and turned right. Above, a star slipped out from behind a bank of clouds. I didn't pray. I simply repeated a plain sentence to myself. From now on, every meal I eat will begin with the truth. And I drove straight toward the light. The next morning, I woke later than usual. The house was so quiet I could hear the wind slipping through the door seams. On the dining table lay the chrysanthemum sprig I'd brought home last night, set in a chipped porcelain cup. I brewed coffee and watched the steam rise, feeling my chest open with it. My phone buzzed. The first text was from Evan. "Dad, last night got intense. Tell me when you're free to talk." The second, longer, was from Lena. "Doing that in front of everyone wasn't fair. You embarrassed us. I know I spoke out of turn, but you have to think of us too." I set the phone down and left it there. For the first time in many years, I didn't jump in to put out anyone's fire. At noon, I went to my lawyer's office to sign the remaining papers. He peered at me over thin frames. "Everything's ready. Revised will, updated financial POA, staged plan to liquidate assets. Anything you want to set aside?" I shook my head. "Set aside respect. Whoever brings that to my door, I'll open it." Out in the parking lot, I saw Evan leaning against my pickup. He wore a light jacket, hands in his pockets. When he saw me, he pushed off the truck and came closer. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. We chose a cafe down the block. Evan stirred his coffee until the foam broke, eyes averted. "I know I was wrong that night," he said, "but putting those papers out in front of everyone, you put me in a spot I couldn't recover from." I sat and listened. He talked about the mortgage, the bills piling on the table, the way his friends had looked at him since last night. Finally, he let out a small sentence. "I don't want to lose you." I leaned back and breathed slowly. "You aren't losing me," I said. "You're losing the right to treat decency as a given." He looked up, gaze flickering between anger and shame. I went on. "Last night wasn't about money. It was about how the dinner table had become a rehearsal stage for humiliation. I returned it to its proper use, to set truth down before the dishes." Evan said nothing. After a while, he nodded barely. "I'll handle things," he said, jaw tight like he was promising himself. "But can you see the kids? Whenever you want. No envelopes needed." "Surely." I looked at my son one beat longer. "All right," I said, "but only if the visit isn't a place for grown-ups to sneak apologies in with candy and half-phrases. I'll come to tell them about their grandmother, not to patch what adults won't say outright." That afternoon, the reporter from last night texted a single line. "I won't write a piece. Every family needs a stretch of time to hear its own voice." I smiled and replied, "Thanks for arriving at the exact moment everyone could hear." She answered with a thumbs up. That was enough. News of the dinner spread the way it does in small towns. A few neighbors sent me messages, half apologetic, half admiring. An old friend called and said just one thing: "You finally accepted that silence isn't always kindness." I paused, then laughed. Right. Some kinds of silence need to be heard. My schedule thinned out. Mornings, I walked around the lake, eyeing the fishing skiffs beached on shore. The cold made frost cling to the fence line, the dead grass shining like silver threads. Slowly, I practiced a new habit: reading at the library, fixing the porch light that had been flickering, changing the chrysanthemum water every 2 days. I stopped by a community foundation office to ask about a scholarship for young carpenters. The program manager showed me a few files. "What would you name the scholarship?" she asked. I looked at the window frame bright with sun. "Name it after her," I said. "The woman who taught me the best soup is the one where no one is left hungry." On the weekend, I received a handwritten letter. Neat script, slightly slanted. It was from Noah, the older grandchild. Grandpa, I'm sorry I sat there in silence. I didn't know what to say. I felt ashamed. I want to hear about Grandma. Can you tell me on Saturday night? I read it over and over, then wrote back. Saturday night at the library, second floor, History Stacks corner. I'll bring the old album. You bring ears that know how to listen. That night, Noah sat across from me, his usual swagger dialed down a notch. I opened the album and pointed to a photo of his grandmother smiling sideways beside a pot of dahlias. I told the story slowly, no bold strokes, not trying to wring feeling from anyone. At the last page, Noah said, I'll ask Mom later, but if she's harsh, I'll tell her I want to hear. I get why you were upset. He stood and gave me a quick, clumsy hug. I didn't chase after an apology. I just nodded and let him keep half the road back to kindness. In the days that followed, Evan started taking evening shifts. Lena sent a few veiled texts and then stopped. I didn't block anyone, but I didn't answer circular questions either. Only once did Lena call directly. She sounded tired. I was wrong, but I still think you went too far. I replied, too far is what people say when they've grown used to disrespect. Put a fence back up and folks call it too much. Call it that if you like. I call it coming to my senses. She fell silent. I heard a long, long exhale at the other end. For the first time, I believe she understood a little. One morning, the bank confirmed Evan's household had set up their own account. Two clean words lit up. Completed. I felt suddenly lighter, as if someone had lifted an old backpack off my shoulders. I shut the laptop and went out to change the porch bulb. The new light snapped on instantly. No flicker, no hesitation. I stood there with paint dust on my fingers and smiled to myself. That evening at the farmer's market, I bought a bundle of herbs and a loaf of bread. The gray-haired vendor asked, "Celebrating something at home?" "A new habit," I said. "Dinner without swallowing anything except food." The last task was to send the updated will to my lawyer and get confirmation it's stored safely. In the cover note, I wrote a short paragraph. If one day the children ask why their names aren't on my documents, let them read three things. 1, respect, unsigned, is still a contract. 2, silence is not consent. 3, family is where no one needs permission to finish a sentence. I signed, folded, and sealed it. On the weekend night, I cooked a simple meal. Tomato soup, toasted bread, a small glass of wine. I turned on an oldies station and sat by the window. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. I set my wife's photo on the table and leaned back. "Everything's where it belongs," I said softly. No fireworks, no applause. Just a thick, even hush spreading through my chest. Before bed, I wrote a note and stuck it inside the cabinet door. A reminder to myself, my meals will begin with truth. My visits will end with kindness. The middle belongs to what I choose to keep. I turned off the lights. The room slid into a gentle dark. The next morning, I took a tool bag and walked to the house behind mine, where old Walt forever fusses with a fence he can't quite finish. "Need a hand?" I asked. He grinned and passed me a hammer. The early sun fell in bands across the new planks. Each stroke of the hammer felt like closing another small gap inside me. At noon, my phone buzzed. A message from Evan. "Dad, we're thinking of a quiet dinner on Sunday. No raised voices, no talking over anyone. If you're free, please come. If not, it's okay." I looked at the screen for a moment, then typed, "Sunday next week. At my place. We'll sit on the porch. One rule, whoever says shut up is the one who goes quiet." The 3 dots blinked and vanished. "Agreed," Evan replied. I stood on the porch and looked down the street. Sunlight slid across the pavement like a thin ribbon. I knew nothing would be spotless after a single dinner, but like the new porch light, some things only need to be switched on. Time will handle the rest. That afternoon, I walked to the lake and sat on the weathered steps watching the ripples. Clouds skimmed the surface and dissolved. Children laughed somewhere across the way. I didn't turn to look. I took a long breath and let the resin of pine The cold of the water and the damp of the wood mingle. That's the smell of life when you sit in the right place. Back home, I flipped on the porch light. The new beam was clear as salt. I chuckled at myself. For so long, I thought I was keeping a home by paying other people's bills. Turns out there's a simpler way. Switch off the words that shrink people. Switch on the boundaries that make them stand up straight. Do it right, and the house warms itself. I shut the door. The latch clicked, soft, like a heartbeat settling into rhythm. The night outside was still long, but inside, one man had chosen his share of peace. If you enjoyed the story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about it in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.